Have you ever imagined what it would look like to revive a 20th century bike? Well, no need to imagine, because in this video I will walk you through the full restoration of an Italian Piaggio Vespa scooter from the 1970s. Once a symbol of freedom, elegance, and love, featuring in at least 1,000 movies including iconic films like Roman Holiday and La Dolce Vita, this legendary machine has become dust-ridden and neglected. But in a few minutes from now, expert restorers will transform it into an astonishing two-wheel marvel. While my focus today is to lead you on an exploration process of a 1970s Piaggio Vespa scooter, I really cannot help but reference the iconic history of the Vespa brand, which dates back to 1946. At the time, Italy was trying to recover from the damages of World War II, and the roads were quite a mess. In view of this, Enrico Piaggio, an Italian industrialist, invented the Vespa scooter from the spare parts of an aircraft landing gear. The bike soon became a culture across Italy and beyond, selling up to 1 million units between 1946 and 1956. And that's why it is even more pleasing to see restorers take on the challenge of giving this sample a new lease of life. Speaking of challenges, there were quite a few of them that the restorers needed to sort out to get this thing working again. Did I just say a few? Scratch that. There were countless obstacles to surmount. Several components on the scooter were suffering from severe rust damage, some key parts were missing, and the color faded beyond recognition. As if that's not bad enough, the tires were completely jammed, and based on how wrecked the whole thing looks, I can bet my life savings that the engine was as good as metal scrap. Now the big question is, will the mechanics be able to pull through all of these daunting challenges and get this thing on the road again? Well, there's only one way to find out. Typically, every restoration starts with the disassembly process, but for this particular project, the restorer had to start by removing the grass scattered in different parts of the scooter. Once this was done, he applied penetrating oil on the corroded components, and then the disassembly phase began. Despite applying lubricant, the restorer experienced resistance with some bolts, and you can understand why. I mean, the bike has been abandoned for so long, and I actually would have been surprised if the screws and bolts moved freely without any resistance. Obviously, that wasn't the case, but our pro restorer was too fired up to give up. With the right tools and a little bit more effort, the components started to come off, right from the seat frame to the fuel tank and the spare tire. At some point, the restorer was evacuating trash while disassembling the scooter because there was too much trash everywhere. But guess what? He got a pleasant surprise when he opened this compartment right here. A set of floppy drive disks all the way from the 20th century. Who knows what could be in them? Anyway, he kept them aside for now and continued with the disassembling process. He turned the scooter on its side for easy access, applied penetrating oil, and one by one, he began to unscrew the components until we were left with this. The tires came off within a few minutes, however. The wheels needed a bit more force and attention. Eventually, it came off, and the restorer was able to access the engine. As you can imagine, dismantling the engine was a whole lot of work on its own, especially because some of the screws were permanently stuck. Thankfully, our pro restorer was able to improvise, and the whole thing was disassembled successfully. Next up, it was time for a thorough wash-up. Each component got its time in what looked like a makeshift shower, and one by one they all came out sparkling. But some others, like the camshaft and spark plug, got special treatment. They were soaked in engine oil and given a good brush. After this, the restorer rebalanced the shaft. Then he brought the components of the engine for degreasing. Once this was done and sorted, it was time to give the rusted and corroded components, subjecting them to a thorough sandbag procedure. But as you know, sandblasting wasn't going to get everything off, so he finished the job with sandpaper. This metal covering had lost its original screw holes, so the restorer drilled new holes into it. Also, the original 58.0 pistons installed in the scooter were damaged beyond repair, so they were replaced with 58.2 pistons. There were a few other replacements as well, like the spark plug, bearings, and one half of the engine casing. Unfortunately, not all damaged parts could be replaced because, as you know, the scooter was produced way back in the 20th century. So sourcing for its spare parts isn't exactly the easiest thing in the world. Not to worry though, because our restorer is a multi-talented guy. He simply grabbed his welding tools and joined everything that needed to be joined. Next up, it was time to give the components a new tint, and our pro restorer didn't disappoint. He grabbed his painting brush, and like a descendant of Pablo Picasso, he gave each component a new layer of coating, reviving their classic look. And with that, the repair and painting process of this 1970s Italian Piaggio Vespa Scooter was complete, or so we thought. You see, just when the reassembly phase was done, some components on the scooter threw a late element of surprise. But again, this expert restorer was equal to the task. After some drilling, cutting, and welding, all the additional issues were fixed, and then it was time to put the pieces together. One after the other, the minute parts were returned to their rightful place, and slowly, the bigger components were beginning to take shape. It was quite tedious, especially with the engine section. However, after some hard and meticulous work, the engine was fully assembled and ready to go. Well, not before we confirmed that it actually runs. Now that we know the engine works, it was time to refurbish other parts of the scooter. Oh, you really think we are done? Of course not. I mean, the bike cannot probably run on this type of tires. So our restorer set out to get them in shape immediately. First, he separated the tire from the rim and the tub. Next, he gave both tires a good watch before sandblasting the rims. And at the end of it all, everything was sparkling like brand new. Then, it was time to restore the main frame. The disassembly process took a while, and understandably so because there were a lot of parts and pieces to be detached. But eventually, the restorer got it done, and it was time to assess the damage. I'm not going to lie, it's pretty bad, and if I hadn't just seen the amazing transformation of the engine a few minutes ago, I would have said it is impossible to restore this frame, particularly the underfloor part that looks like it has been to multiple world wars. But the restorer took on the challenge, and we had to give him all the support he needed. As you can imagine, some parts were damaged beyond repair, like the engine cover and trunk. Thankfully, ample replacements were found at a scrap store for just $8. Yeah, I know it's dirt cheap, but the restorer had worked so hard all day and certainly deserves every extra penny of discount he gets. Moving on with the repairs, he tried to sandblast the body, but he realized it was going to take him all day, so he switched things up with a blowtorch. Next, it was time to mend the dents and damages. This, of course, required a little bit of everything, including welding, iron filling, scrapping, and some really hard and precise beating. After all the hard work, here is what we were left with. To be honest, it's a lot better than it was before, but overall, the result wasn't satisfactory. So the restoration continued with a myriad of activities ranging from degreasing to dent mending, sanding, filling, and priming. Once this was done, it was time to give this bad boy a new look. The first coat of paint was applied, and it was almost perfect, but there was just a little work left to be done. So the restorer did some minor bodywork, and we went in for another round of painting. Next, the shock absorber was cleaned and dipped in an electroplating solution, and this was the result. Finally, the mirrors got the same lush treatment, the headlight was replaced, and every other thing that needed fixing was fixed, and the components that needed replacing were replaced. This includes the front frame, seats, fuel tank, and the handlebar. Then at last, it was time to reassemble the components and see the result of all the hard work that our diligent and hardworking mechanic had put in. As the components were being arranged, a flurry of emotions ran through my veins. On one hand, I was really excited about the work that had been done, and mentally, I was trying to recall the amazing transformation of the individual components and how they would look when they are combined. But then again, I know well enough not to get ahead of myself because in delicate restoration projects such as this one, you can't always predict the outcome. Sometimes you think you've done everything right, and yet the outcome might not meet your expectations. So, as you can imagine, it was a really tense moment for me and probably for the restorer as well. But of course, the restoration would never be complete without the unveiling, and deep down, I was really itching to see it. So for the last time in this tedious project, I crossed my fingers, held my breath, and closed my eyes. hoping to be pleasantly surprised. And guess what? That's exactly what happened. The moment I saw the front view of the scooter, all my worries just disappeared into thin air. I was so stunned, I could almost not shut the doors of my vocal cavity. And can you really blame me? The sheer beauty of this thing is absolutely blinding, and not in a million worlds would I have ever imagined that the result will be as good as this. Not to mention that it actually runs. This isn't just an ordinary restoration, it's the reincarnation of an iconic scooter and the grand showcase of the best restorative talent you'll find anywhere on the entire planet. Over to you now. What do you make of this incredible 1970s Italian Piaggio Vespa Scooter transformation? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to explore more amazing restorations on our channel.